again. Somebody says they couldn't hear me. My volume is turned up all the way. So there should be. Let's try this again. See if anybody can hear me. Um, Now let's go back to the top again and restart everything all over again. I wasn't planning on this, but I'm gonna have a couple videos out. Today, this one's on Marcus Aurelius, and then on Sunday, I'm gonna have a video. I'm gonna have a YouTube video, a live stream video up on Kyle Hendricks, who was a baseball player that played for the Cubs, for 11 years, and then this year he pitched for Los Angeles Angels, and then he retired. So I'll have a video up dedicating his career as a Cub on Sunday, because it's like my only other day to do that. So today, Marcus Aurelius was an emperor of Rome. What the hell? Oh, what the fuck are you doing? Oh, right here. Okay, so let's get this back started, and hopefully people can hear me. Hopefully the what is this thing? Oh no. I don't know what the retouch thing is. Okay. So Marcus Aurelius Antonius was born in the year on April 26, 121. He died on March 17th of 180 of the year 180, and he was a Roman emperor from 161 to 180, and a Stoic philosopher. He was a member of the Nerva Antonine dynasty, the last of the rulers, later known as the Five Good Emperors, and the last emperor of the Pax Romana, an age of relative peace, calm, and stability for the Roman Empire, lasting from the year 27 BC until the year 180 AD. He served as Roman consul in the year 140, and the year 145, and the year 161. Now, Marcus Aurelius was the son of the praetor Marcus Annius Verus and his wife Domitia Cabella. Now, he was related through marriage to the emperors Trajan and Hadrian. Now, Marcus was 3 when his father died, and he was raised by his mother and paternal grandfather. But after Hadrian's adopted son Aelius Caesar died in the year 138, Hadrian adopted Marcus's uncle Antonius Pius as his new heir. It's probably because of that phone call. Sometimes it does that. Now, after Hadrian's adopted son Aelius Caesar died in the year 138, Hadrian adopted Marcus's uncle Antonius Pius as his new heir. Now, in turn, Antonius adopted Marcus and Lucius, the son of Aelius. Now, Hadrian died that year, and Antonius became emperor. Now, heir to the throne, Marcus would study Greek and Latin under tutors such as Herodes, Atticus, and Marcus Cornelius Fronto, and he would marry Antonius' daughter Faustina in the year 145. Now, after Antonius died in the year 161, Marcus acceded to the throne alongside his adopted brother, who took the regnal name Lucius Aurelius Verus. Now, under the reign of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Empire witnessed much military conflict, which back then that was not an uncommon thing. But in the east, the Romans fought the Parthian War of Lucius Verus with a revitalized Parthian Empire and the rebel kingdom of Armenia. Now, Marcus defeated the Marcomanni Quadi and the Sarmatian Lazages in the Marcomannic Wars. Now, these and other Germanic people began to represent a troubling reality for the empire. Now, he reduced the silver purity of the Roman currency and the denarius. Now, the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire appears to have increased during his reign, although his involvement is unlikely, since there are no Christian sources ascribing him any blame, and he was praised by Justin Martyr and Tertullian. At top here, you'll see a marble bust of Marcus Aurelius. A lot of these busts and statues are held at a museum in Rome, Italy, which is where he was born and raised at. So we got that. Okay, so now Marcus was the son of the praetor Marcus Aeneas Verus and his wife. Um, okay, hold on, go back down here. Okay, so the Antonine Plague broke out in the year 165 or 166 and devastated the population of the Roman Empire, causing the deaths of 5 to 10 million people. That's the same thing that happened with the bubonic plague. That was the one with the rats, and the rats were carrying diseases in England, and then England like lost a majority of its population, due to that. Um, Now, Lucius Verus may have died from the plague in 169, but when Marcus himself died in the year 180, he would be succeeded. Um, he was succeeded by his son Commodus. Now, Commodus' succession after Marcus has been a subject of debate among both contemporary and modern historians. The column of Marcus Aurelius and a equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius still stand in Rome today, where they were erected in celebration of his military victories. Um, Now, as a philosopher, his work, Meditations, is one of the most important sources for the modern understanding of ancient strict philosophy. These writings have been praised by fellow writers, philosophers, monarchs, and politicians centuries after his death. Um, Now, major sources depicting the life and the life and ruling of Marcus Aurelius are very patchy and frequently unreliable because people did not write down everything back then. So it's kind of hard to state whether something back then was true or not. Um, the most important group of these sources is the biographies contained in the Historia Augusta, and which was claimed to be written by a group of authors at the turn of the 4th century A.D. But it's believed that they were in fact written by a single author referred to here as the biographer from about 395. The latter biographies and the biographies of subordinate emperors and usurpers are unreliable, but the earlier biographies derived primarily from now lost earlier sources, Marius, Maximus, or Notus, are considered to be more accurate. Now, for Marcus's life and ruling, the biographies of Hadrian, Antonius, Marcus, and Lucius are largely reliable, but those of Aelius Verus and Avidius Cassius are not. Um, a body of correspondence between Marcus's tutor Fronto and various Antonine officials survives in a series of patchy manuscripts covering the period of 138 to the year 166. Now, Marcus's own meditations offer a window on his inner life, but they are largely undateable, and they make very few specific references to worldly affairs. Uh, the main narrative source for the period is Cassius Dio, a Greek senator from Bithynian Nicaea, who wrote a history of Rome from its founding to 229 and 80 different books. Now Dio is vital for the military history of the period, but his senatorial prejudices and strong opposition to imperial expansion obscure his perspective here. Like Pontius Pilate was a pretty big one back then too. And Pontius Pilate, I don't know if he was considered an emperor or not, but Pontius Pilate was supposedly responsible. But supposedly Pontius Pilate was responsible for sending Jesus to his death. Now I don't know how accurate that was either, but that was mentioned in the Bible too. Um, Though some other literary sources provide specific details, like the writings of the physician Galen and the habits of the Antonine elite, the orations of Aelius Aristosus, um, shit, excuse me, um, um, back then emperors would be listed on a lot of coins. But on the Temporal Times, and the Constitution is preserved in the Digest and Codex. Marcus's legal work. Now, inscriptions and coin finds supplement literary sources. Um, Now, here's a picture of one coin that Marcus was on, and you can see that here. Um, possibly, but I also had a lot of blood draw. Um, well, actually, the blood draw wouldn't make me sick anyway. But I work at UPS, so it's not uncommon to get sick through people there because they don't cover their mouths when they cough. They don't wear masks. They don't wear masks when they do when they're supposed to be wearing masks in certain parts for cleaning. Um, so it's not uncommon to get sick through that job. Um, Now Marcus was born on April 26th of the year 121 in Rome, Italy, and his birth name is sometimes given as Marcus Aeneas Verus, but sources um, assigned this name to him upon his father's death and unofficial adoption by his grandfather. Um, Upon his coming of age, he may have been known as Marcus Aeneas Catulus Severus at birth or at some point in his youth, or Marcus Catulus Severus Aeneas Verus upon his adoption by Antonius as heir to the throne. He would later be dubbed Marcus alias Aurelius Verus Caesar. And upon his ascension, he was Marcus Aurelius Antonius Augustus until his death. Epiphanes of Salamis, in his chronology of the Roman emperors, included in his on weights and measures, calls him Marcus Aurelius Verus. Um, and tomorrow I will not be home. I'm going to be doing my auditioning for the movie I'm going to be in. So I'm going over some lines with some guy. So I'm going to be going over my lines with some guy tomorrow for the movie I'm going to be in. So I won't be home to do it, to do the video. Because I was debating about whether to put it out today or Sunday. And I'm like, okay, tomorrow won't work. So the only days would have been today or Sunday. Um, Now, Marcus Aurelius' father was Marcus Aeneas Verus III. His gens Aenea was of Italian origin, but settled at some point in the small colony of Eucubi, um, which is southeast of Cordoba, and in the Iberine Bateca, near modern Spain. Now, the gens had legendary claims of descendants from Numa Pompilius. The Ani rose to prominence in Rome in the late 1st century AD. We don't know if it's going to be put out in movie theaters just yet. Now, what we're going to do is the movie is filmed. The movie is filmed on location in Chicago because that's where I'm from, and I was born and raised in Chicago. So it's great to do a movie in Chicago because it makes me have ties to my roots at home. So what we're going to do tomorrow is, like I said, study the lines. We're going to film the movie, and then we're going to push it out at a film festival sometime next year. And hopefully, maybe somebody from the film festival will pick it up and put it in movies in the theaters next year or so, or maybe within the next couple of years. So hopefully that's what our plan is. Now, the Anai rose to prominence in Rome, Italy, in the late 1st century AD. Now, Marcus is his great-grandfather, Marcus Aeneas Verus. The first was a senator, and according to the Historia Augustus, I live in Chicago. If you're going to Midway, you're not that far from my house. Because I think you said last week you're going to Midway, and Midway is about 20 minutes from me. Now Marcus is his great-grandfather. Marcus Aeneas Verus was a senator, and according to the Historia Augusta Expurgator, his grandfather Marcus Aeneas Verus II was made patrician in the year 73. And between the year 73 and 74. Now through his grandmother Rapilla Postina, Marcus was related to the Nerva Antonine dynasty. Rapilla was the stepdaughter of Salonia Matidia, who was the niece of the Emperor Trajan. Um, Now, Marcus's mother, Domitia Lucilla Minor, also known as Domitia Cabilla, was the daughter of the Roman patrician Calbisius Tullus, and inherited a great fortune described at length in one of Pliny the Elder's letters. From her parents and grandparents, her inheritance included large brickworks on the outskirts of Rome, a profitable enterprise in an era when the city was experiencing a construction boom. Now, this is funny because back then, women were not allowed to handle any business affairs. They were not allowed to own any businesses. That all belonged to the men, and it was uncommon for a woman to get her hands on anything like that. Um, just like back then, women didn't have the right to vote. Um, that might be by Midway. I think you're talking. I think you're talking about the Fairfield Inn by Midway. Because there is one over there. Um, yeah, I don't get out to Midway that much anyway, unless it's really a need for it. Um, so you're staying at the Fairfield Inn by Midway. So I know exactly where you're going to be staying at. There's like a whole bunch of restaurants over there, along with Midway Airport. There's the Richard J. Daley College over there. Um, so yeah, I know where you're at, Dan, for staying over there. Um, like I said, that's like 20 minutes from my house. Um, and the Horti Domitia Cabrilli, or Lucille, was a villa on the Salian Hill of Rome. Marcus himself was born and raised in the Horti, and he would often refer to the Salian Hill as my Sicilian. The adoptive family of Marcus was the gens Aurelia, an old Roman general family. His adoptive father, Antonius Pius, came from the Aureli Fulvi, a branch of the Aureli settled in the colony of the Melsis in Roman Gaul. Um, um, Now, Marcus's sister Ania Cornificia Faustina was probably born in the year 122 to 123, between that year anyway. His father probably died in the year 125 or 126, but when Marcus was 3 years old during his praetorship, although he could hardly have known his father, Marcus would write in his meditations that he had learned modesty and manliness um, from his memories of his father and the man's reputation. His mother Lucilla did not remarry after this, and following prevailing aristocratic customs, probably did not spend much time with her son. Instead, Marcus was in the care of nurses, and he was raised after his father's death by his grandfather, Marcus Aeneas Verus, who had always retained the legal authority of Patria Potestas over his son and grandson. Now, technically, this would not be considered an official adoption, but the creation of a new and different Potestas. Now, Lucius Catulus Severus, described as Marcus's maternal great-grandfather, also participated in his upbringing. He was probably the elder Domitia Lucilla's stepbrother. Marcus was raised in his parents' home on the Salian Hill. Um, an upscale area with few public buildings but many aristocratic villas. Marcus's grandfather owned a place beside the Laserian, where he would spend much of his childhood, and Marcus thanks his grandfather for teaching him good character and avoidance of bad temper. Um, Now, he was less fond of the mistress his grandfather took and lived with after the death of his wife Rupilla, but Marcus was grateful that he did not have to live with her longer than he ever did. Um, now here's a picture of a bust of Marcus Aurelius. This is a bust of young Marcus Aurelius, which is held in a museum in Rome, Italy, because that's where a lot of his stuff is held at. Um, Now, from a young age, Marcus displayed enthusiasm for wrestling and boxing. He trained in wrestling as a youth and into his teenage years. Now, back then, they didn't have TV, they didn't have cell phones, they really didn't have books. So, to me, I would be fucking bored. They didn't even have cars back then, so they had to get around by riding on horses or walking. Back then, that's how they did it. I would be fucking bored as hell out of my mind if I didn't have the shit that I have now. Um, Now, from a young age, like I said, Marcus displayed enthusiasm for wrestling and boxing. I was never really into wrestling, but I am a big boxing fan. I'm a big fan of Manny Pacquiao when it comes to boxing. Um, Now, he trained in wrestling as a youth and also into his teenage years, and he learned to fight in armor and joined the Silii, an order of priests dedicated to the god Mars that were responsible for the sacred shields, um, called Encilia, and possibly for heralding war seasons on beginning and end. Um, Now, Marcus was educated at home in line with contemporary aristocratic trends. He thanks Catulus Severus for encouraging him to avoid public schools. One of his teachers, yes, I would have to research a lot of the stuff. Um, I'm always looking for ideas on videos to do because there's a lot of stuff that people will send me that I don't know anything about. So let me write that down before I forget. The Conquest of 1086. Um, where is my pen? Okay, there's my pen. And where is my paper? Oh, here we go. The Norman Conquest of 1086. I don't think I know that one. Um, like I said, I'm always looking for ideas on stuff to do videos on. Um, okay, so I just wrote that down so I don't forget. Um, Now, one of his teachers, Diognetus, a painting master. Yeah, so do I. I've always been a big fan of history and just researching it. Now, Marcus took up the dress and habits of the philosopher around the year 132. Around the year 132, at the behest of Diognetus, Marcus took up the dress and habits of the philosopher, and he studied while wearing a rough green cloak and would sleep on the ground until his mother persuaded him to sleep in a bed. Back then, their beds were probably not comfortable because back then they didn't have the type of material that we have now when it came to sleeping on a bed. A new set of tutors, the Homeric scholar Alexander of Colitium, along with Trotius Aper and Tuticus Proclus, teachers of Latin, took over Marcus's education in about the year 132 or 133. Marcus thanks Alexander for his training in literary styling. Alexander's influence and emphasis on matter over style and careful wording, with the occasional Homeric quotation, has been detected in Marcus's mediations. Um, and here's some more coins of the emperor coins. Back then they were very on one side is supposed to be Hadrian, and on the other side is supposed to be Lucius. Um, so and in late 136, Hadrian almost died from a hemorrhage, convalescent in his villa at Tivoli. He selected Lucius Commodus, Marcus's intended father-in-law, as a successor and adopted son. According to the biographer, against the wishes of everyone, while his motives are not certain. Now in the movie Gladiator, they portrayed Commodus as kind of an ass. um, especially with um, especially with Marcus. They portrayed Marcus and Commodus as asses in the movie Gladiator. But Gladiator, I actually do like the movie because I do like Richard Harris and Russell Crowe, who both appear in the movie. And Gladiator was one of the last movies that Richard Harris did before he died, other than Harry Potter for the second movie. Um, Now, while his motives are not certain, it would appear that his goal was to eventually place the then two young Marcus on the throne. Um, as part of his adoption, Commodus took the name Lucius Caesar. His health was so poor that during his ceremony for Marcus becoming heir to the throne, he was too weak to lift a large shield on his own, and he had to have people help him. Um, yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, Richard Harris, and Russell Crowe did very good roles in that movie. Um, After a brief stationing on the Danube frontier, Aurelius returned to Rome to make an address to the Senate on the first day of the year 138. However, the night before the scheduled speech, he would grow ill and died of a hemorrhage later on in the day. Yes, I know. That's what I was saying, though, too. I've seen the movie so many damn times, so I don't know how accurate it is. Or was he really an ass? Or were they just over exaggerating the scenes? Um, and that's basically Hollywood for you. Hollywood exaggerates a lot of shit. They either leave certain things out or they add stuff in that didn't really happen with certain people. Like the movie American Gangster with Denzel Washington. He plays a guy named Frank Lucas who's a drug dealer, but the cop that was chasing him down, the cop that was chasing him in the movie, didn't have a kid in real life, but in the movie they portrayed him as having a kid, and he was in the middle of a custody dispute. So, like I said, that movie is highly exaggerated. Um, so on January 24th of the year 138, Hadrian selected Aurelius Antonius, the husband of Marcus's aunt Faustina the elder, as his new successor. Um, as part of Hadrian's terms, Antonius in turn adopted Marcus and Lucius Commodus, the son of Lucius Aelius. Now Marcus became alias Aurelius Verus, and Lucius became L alias Aurelius Commodus. Um, At Hadrian's request, Antonius's daughter Faustina was betrothed to Lucius, but Marcus reportedly greeted the news that Hadrian had become his adoptive grandfather with sadness to joy. Only with reluctance did he move from his mother's house on the Salian to Hadrian's private home. Um, at some point in the year 138, Hadrian requested in the Senate that Marcus be exempt from law, barring him from becoming a quaestor before his 21st birthday. The Senate complied, and Marcus served under Antonius the consul for 139. Marcus's adoption diverted him from the typical career path of his class. If not for his adoption, he probably would have become triumvir monotales, a highly regarded post involving token administration of the state. Meant after that, after that he could have served as tribune with the legion, but becoming the legion's nominal second in command, Marcus probably would have opted for travel and further education instead. As it was, Marcus was set apart from his fellow citizens. Nonetheless, his biographer attests that his character remained unaffected. He still showed the same respect to his relations as he had when he was an ordinary citizen, and he was thrifty and careful of his possessions as he had been when he lived in a private household. Now, after a series of suicide attempts, all thwarted by Antonius, Hadrian left for Abai, a seaside resort on the Campanian coast. Now, his condition did not improve, and he abandoned the diet prescribed by his doctors, indulging himself in food and alcohol. He sent for Antonius, who was at his side when he died on July 10th of 138. His remains were buried quietly at Puteoli. The succession to Antonius was peaceful and stable, but Antonius kept Hadrian's nominees in office and appeased the Senate, respecting its privileges and commuting the death sentences of men charged in Hadrian's last days. For his dutiful behavior, Antonius was asked to accept the name Pius. Here's some more coins here. At the top here, you got a coin of Antonius Pius, and down at the bottom is another one of Antonius Pius called a denarius. I'm not sure what the difference between those two are. One looks silver and one looks bronze. Immediately after Hadrian died, Antonius approached Marcus and requested that his marriage arrangement be amended and annulled. Marcus, as his betrothal to Sionia Fabia, would be annulled, and he would be betrothed to Faustina, Antonius' daughter instead. Faustina's betrothal to Sionia's brother Lucius Commodus would also have to be annulled. Marcus consented to Antonius' proposal. He was made consul for 140 with Antonius as his colleague, and he was appointed as suburb, one of the Knight's Six Commanders, which was a high honor back then at the order's annual parade on July 15th of 139. As the heir apparent, Marcus became princeps head of the equestrian order. He now took the name Marcus alias Aurelius Verus Caesar. Marcus would later caution himself against taking the whole name too seriously. He see that you do not turn into a Caesar, but do not be dipped into the purple dye, for that can happen. At the Senate's request, Marcus joined all the priestly colleges. Direct evidence for membership, however, is available only for the Arbal Brethren. Now Antonius demanded that Marcus reside in the house of Tiberius, the imperial palace in the Palatine, and take up the habits of his new station, the Olicum Fastigium, or pomp of the courts, against Marcus's objections. Marcus would struggle to reconcile the life of the courts with his philosophic yearnings. He told himself that it was an attainable goal, and where life is possible, then it is possible to live the right life. Life is possible in the palace, so it is possible to live the right life in a palace. But he found it difficult nonetheless, and he would criticize himself in the mediation, using court life in front of company. Um, As questor, Marcus would have had little administrative work to do. He would read imperial letters to the Senate when Antonius was absent, and would do secretarial work for the senators. But he felt drowned. In paperwork, and complained to his tutor, Marcus Cornelius Fronto. "I am so out of breath from dictating nearly 30 different letters." He was being fitted for ruling the state, but in the words of his biographer, he was required to make a speech to the assembled senators as well, making oratorical training essential for the job. Um, Now, on January 1st of the year 145, Marcus was made consul a second time. Now, Fronto urged him in a letter to have plenty of sleep, so that you may come into the Senate with a good color and read your speech with a strong voice. Now, Marcus had complained of an illness in an earlier letter. "As far as my strength is concerned, I am beginning to get it back, and there is no trace of the pain in my chest, but that ulcer, I am having treatment and taking care not to do anything that would interfere with it." Back then, even with doctors, they didn't have the proper equipment that we have now, when it came to being treated for medication and all this other stuff. Um, Now, even though Marcus was never particularly healthy or strong, but Marcus was praised by Cassius Dio, writing of his later letters, for behaving dutifully in spite of his various illnesses. Um, in April of 145, Marcus married Faustina, legally his sister. So basically, they had inbreeding as far back as then. Damn, the Trump history goes back that far. Damn. Little is specifically known of his ceremony, but the biography calls it noteworthy. Coins were issued with the heads of the couple, and Antonius, as Pontifex Maximus, would have officiated. Marcus makes no apparent reference to the marriage in his surviving letters, and only sparing references to Faustina. After taking the toga of Aurelius in the year 136, Marcus probably would begin his training in oratory. He had three tutors in Greek: Ananias Macer, Canonius Sealer, and Herodes Atticus. Um, and one in Latin, Marcus Cornelius Fronto. The latter two were the most esteemed orators of their time, but probably did not become his tutors until his adoption by Antonius in the year 138. Um, the preponderance of Greek tutors indicates the importance of the Greek language to the aristocracy of Rome, and this is the age of the second sophistic and Renaissance in Greek letters. Although educated in Rome, and his mediations, Marcus would write his inmost thoughts to Greek. Um, Now, Atticus was highly controversial. An enormously rich Athenian, probably the richest man in the eastern half of the empire, he was too quick to anger he was too quick to be angered and resented by his fellow Athenians for his patronizing manner. Um, Now, Atticus was an inveterate. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, which is opposite of my other channel is RBW King. I'm gonna have a video up there on Sunday, dedicating the video to Kyle Hendricks, who was a former pitcher for the Cubs, and he just announced his retirement. Was it this week? So if you want to check out my other channel, RBW King, there's 498 subscribers on there, so you can subscribe to that channel also if you want to. Um, Now, in spite of the influence of Atticus, Marcus would later become a strict philosopher. He would not mention Herodes at all in his mediations, but in spite of the fact they would come into contact many times over the following years. Um, Now, Fronto was highly esteemed in the subconsciously antiquarian word of Latin letters. He was thought of as only second to Cicero, and perhaps even an alternative to him. He did not care much for Atticus, though Marcus was eventually to put the pair on speaking terms. Fronto exercised a complete mastery of Latin. It's called RBW King. I'll show this to you here. Hold on. I have YouTube analytics on my computer that will show you my the stuff on my phone. So here it is, RBW King. This is my other channel. Um, RBW is for my initial is for my first my first name, and the BW is for my last name, what my legal last name is. Um, so as you can see that here, RBW King, and then you go over here to the second channel. Shit. Okay, return to studio. For some reason it does that where it shuts down for once in a while. Let me see. Okay, that should not be on this one. Okay, hold on. Switch account. Here we go. Yeah, so right here. Now we got this one, Rush of the King, which is the one I do a lot of my live streams on. I do occasionally do a live stream on the other channel, not as much, but you get the idea. Um, so let's go back to the Marcus Aurelius one. Okay, so now Franco exercised a complete mastery of Latin, capable of tracing expressions through the literature, producing obscure synonyms and challenging minor improprieties and word choice. Um, Now, a significant amount of the correspondence between Franco and Marcus have survived. The pair were very close, using intimate language such as "Farewell, my Franco, wherever you are, my most sweet love and delights. How is it between you and me? And I love you, and you are not here." In their correspondence, Marcus spent time with Franco's wife and daughter, both named Cradia, and they enjoyed light conversation. Now, there's a lot of gay shit that happened back then too. So basically, we were having gay sex, which is what the Bible condones. The Bible does not. The Bible basically is against. The Bible is against gay marriage and gay sex, because it's one of the quotes in the Bible says you should not lie with that man should not lie with man as woman lies with another, because in the Bible it states to be fruitful and multiply. If two guys are having sex and two women are having sex together, you can't really reproduce. Um, Now he wrote Franco a letter on his birthday, claiming to love him as he loved himself, and calling on the gods to ensure that every word that he learned of literature he would learn from the lips of Franco. His prayers for Franco's health were more than conventional, because Franco was frequently ill. At times, he seems to be an almost constant invalid, always suffering. About one quarter of the surviving letters deal with the man's sickness, and Marcus asked that Franco's pain um, be inflicted on himself of my own accord with every kind of discomfort. Now, Franco never became Marcus's full-time teacher, but he would continue his career as an advocate. Um, on one notorious case brought him into conflict with Atticus anyway. Marcus pleaded with Franco, first with advice, then as a favor not to attack Atticus. He already asked Atticus to refrain from making the first blows. Now, Franco replied that he was surprised to discover Marcus counted Atticus as a friend. Perhaps Atticus was not yet Marcus's tutor, and allowed that Marcus might be correct, but nonetheless he affirmed his intent to win the case by any means necessary, and the changes are frightful and must be spoken of as frightful. Now, those in particular that refer to the beating and robbing I will describe, so that they may savor of gall and bile. If I happened to call him an educated little Greek, it would not mean war to the death, but the outcome of the trial is unknown. By the age of 25, which was between the years of April 146 and the year April 147, Marcus had grown disaffected with his studies in jurisprudence, and he showed some signs of general malaise. His master, he writes to Franco, was an unpleasant blowhard, and had made a hit at him. It is easy to sit yawning next to a judge, he says, but to be a judge is noble work. Marcus had himself grown tired of his exercises of taking positions in imaginary debates. When he criticized the insincerity of conventional language, Franco took up to defend it. In any case, Marcus's formal education was now all over. He had kept his teachers on. He kept in touch with his teachers on good terms, following them devotedly, but it affected his healthy adversary. His biographer writes to have devoted so much effort to his studies, it was the only thing the biographer could find fault within Marcus's entire boyhood in general. Now, Franco had warned Marcus against the study of philosophy early on. Oh, hold on. Okay. Now, Franco had warned Marcus against the study of philosophy early on, but it is better never to have touched the teaching of philosophy than to have tasted it superficially, with the edge of the lips, as the saying is. He disdained philosophy and philosophers and looked down on Marcus's sessions with Apollonius of Chalcedon and others in his circle. Um, Fronto puts an uncharitable interpretation of Marcus's conversion to philosophy. In the passion of the young, tired of boring work, Marcus had turned to philosophy to escape the constant exercise of orator training. Marcus kept in close touch with Fronto, but he would ignore Fronto's but he would ignore Fronto's many scruples. Um, Now, Apollonius may have introduced Marcus to Stoic philosophy, but not sure how well that really is. Um, but Quintus Junius Rusticus would have the strongest influence on the boy. He was the man Fronto recognized as having wooed Marcus away from oratory, but he was older than Fronto and 20 years older than Marcus. As the grandson of Aurelius Rusticus, one of the martyrs for the tyranny of Domitian, between the years of 81 and the year 96. He was heir to the tradition of Stoic opposition to the bad emperors of the first century, the true successor of Seneca as opposed to Fronto, the false one. Marcus thanks Rusticus for teaching him not to be led astray into enthusiasm for rhetoric, for writing on speculative themes, for discoursing on moralizing texts, to avoid oratory, poetry, and fine writing. Um, Now on November 30th of the year 147, Faustina gave birth to a girl named Domitilla Faustina, and she was the first of 13 kids that they would have, including two sets of twins that Faustina would bear over the next 30 years. The next day, on December 1st, Antonius gave Marcus the tribunican power and the imperium, authority over the armies and provinces of the emperor. As tribune, he had the right to bring one measure before the Senate after the four after the four that Antonius could introduce. His tribunican powers would be renewed with Antonius's on December 10th of 147. Um, Now, the first mention of Domitilla in Marcus's letters reveals her as a sickly infant. Caesar to Fronto, if the gods are willing, we seem to have a hope for recovery. Now, certain things have stopped. The little attacks of fever have been driven away, but the emaciation is still extreme, and there is still quite a bit of coughing. He and Faustina, Marcus wrote, had been pretty occupied with the girl's care, and Domitilla would die eventually in the year 151. Um, even the emperor's um kids would be featured on coins too. Um, now Lucius started his political career as a quaestor in the year 153, and here's a bust of Antonius Pius. Um, as you can see that there. Um, so Lucius started his political career as a quaestor in the year 153. He was consul in 154, and was consul again with Marcus in the year 161. Lucius had no other titles except that of son of Augustus. Lucius had markedly different personality from Marcus. He enjoyed sports of all kinds, but especially hunting and wrestling. He took obvious pleasure in the circus games and gladiatorial fights. He did not marry until the year 164. Um, and in 156, Antonius, who had turned 70, found it difficult to keep himself upright without stays. He started nibbling on dry bread to give him the strength to stay awake through his morning receptions. As Antonius was aging, Marcus would take on more administrative duties, and more still when he became the Praetorian prefect, an office that was as much secretarial as military. When Marcus Gabius Maximus died in the year 156 or 157, in 160, Marcus and Lucius were designated joint consuls for the following year. Antonius may have already been ill at that time. Um, 2 days before his death. I don't know. That would be something I have to look up. 2 days before his death, the biographer reports Antonius was at his ancestral estate of Lorium in Rome, Italy. He ate alpine cheese and dinner quite greedily, and the night he vomited. He had a fever the next day, and the day after that, on March 7th, 161, he summoned the imperial council and passed the state and his daughter to Marcus, and the emperor gave the keynote to his life and the last word that he uttered when the tribune of the night watch came to ask the password, equanimity. He then turned over as if going to sleep and died. His death closed out the longest reign since Augustus, surpassing Tiberius by only a couple months. Here's another picture of the bust of Marcus Aurelius on the left and Lucius Verus on the right. Now, after Antonius passed away in the year 161, Marcus was effectively sole ruler of the empire. The formalities of the position would follow. The Senate would soon grant him the name Augustus and the title Imperator, and he would soon be formally elected as Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of the official cult. Marcus made some show of resistance, but the biographer writes that he was compelled to take imperial power, and this may have been a genuine fear of imperial power. Marcus, with his preference for the philosophic life, found the imperial office unappealing. His training as a Stoic, however, had made the choice to clear to him that it was his duty. Although Marcus showed no personal affection for Hadrian, significantly he does not thank him in the first book of his Meditations. He presumably believed it was his duty to enact the man's succession plans. Plus, although the Senate planned to confirm Marcus alone, he refused to take office unless Lucius received equal powers. The Senate accepted, granting Lucius the imperium, the tribunican power, and the title Augustus. Marcus became an official tutelar imperator. Caesar Marcus Aurelius Antonius Augustus. Lucius, forgoing his name Commodus, and taken Marcus's family name Verus, became imperator. Caesar Lucius Aurelius Verus Augustus. It was the first time that Rome was ruled by two emperors, and usually it was just one. In spite of the nominal equity, Marcus held more authority than Lucius. He had been consul once more than Lucius had, and he assured Antonius's role, and he alone was Pontifex Maximus. It would have been clear to the public which emperor was the more senior. As the biographer wrote, Verus obeyed Marcus as a lieutenant obeys a proconsul or a governor obeys the emperor. Immediately after their Senate confirmation, the emperors proceeded to the Castra Praetoria, the camp of the Praetorian Guard. Lucius addressed the assembled troops, which then claimed the emperor as imperators. Then, like every new emperor since Claudius, Lucius promised the troops a special donative. However, this donative was twice the size of those past 20,000. Sesterus, or 5,000 denarii per capita, with more to officers. In return for this bounty, equivalent to several years' pay, the troops swore an oath to protect the emperors. The ceremony was perhaps not entirely necessary, given that Marcus's accession had been peaceful and unopposed, but it was good insurance against later military troubles. Upon his accession, he was devalued. He also devalued the Roman currency, and he decreased the silver purity of the denarius from 83% to 79%. The silver weight dropping from 2.68 grams to 2.57 grams. Now, Antonius' funeral ceremonies were, in the words of the biographer, elaborate. And if his funeral followed those of his predecessors, his body would be cremated on a pier at the campus Myrtilus, and his spirit would have been seen as ascending to the gods' homes in the heavens. And Marcus and Lucius nominated their father for defecation. In contrast to their behavior during Antonius's campaign to defy Hadrian, the Senate did not oppose the emperor's wishes, but a flamen or cultic priest was appointed to minister the cult of the defied Divus Antonius. Antonius's remains were laid to rest in Hadrian's mausoleum beside the remains QB, and beside the remains of Marcus's children and of Hadrian himself. Now, now the temple he had dedicated to his wife Diva Faustina became the temple of Antonius and Faustina. It serves as the church of San Lorenzo and Miranda. Um, Now, in accordance to according with as his succession, Marcus transferred part of his mother's estate to his nephew, Eumus Quadratus. Faustina was 3 months pregnant at her husband's accession. During the pregnancy, she dreamed of giving birth to two serpents, one fiercer than the other. On August 31st, she gave birth at Lanuvium to twins, T. Aurelius Pulvis Antonius and Lucius Aurelius Commodus. Um, Now, aside from the fact that the twins shared Caligula's birthday, the omens were favorable, and the astrologers drew positive horoscopes for the children, and the births were celebrated in the imperial coinage. Um, and here's another bust of Marcus Aurelius as he got older. This was between the year. This one is in New York, the Metropolitan Museum of New York City in New York. This was between the year 161 and 169. That's when it was supposedly carved. Um, Now, soon after the emperor's ascension, Marcus's 11-year-old daughter, Aeneas Lucilla, was betrothed to Lucius. In spite of the fact that he was formerly her uncle, still, like I said, Trump's orders were inbreeding as far back. Damn. Um, at the ceremonies commemorating the event, new provisions were made for the support of poor children along the lines of earlier imperial foundations. Marcus and Lucius proved popular with the people of Rome, who strongly approved of their simulator, which is like lacking pomp behavior. Um, the emperors were permitted free speech, evidenced by the fact that the comedy writer Aurelius was able to criticize them without suffering retribution. As the biographer wrote, no one missed the lenient ways of Pius. Um, Now Marcus would replace a number of the empire's major officials. Um, Now Marcus, like I said, replaced a lot of the empire's major officials. The Epistulus Sextus Bolognesius, he put him in charge of the imperial correspondence. Who was in charge of the imperial correspondence, actually. He was replaced with Titus Clemens. Now, Clemens was from the frontier province of Pannonia and had served in the war in Mauritania. Recently, he had served as procurator of 5 provinces. He was a man suited for a time of military crisis. Lucius Volusius Messenius, Marcus's former tutor, he had been prefectural governor of Egypt at Marcus's ascension. However, Messenius was recalled, made senator, and appointed prefect to the treasury. He was made consul soon after. Fronto's son-in-law, Gaius Fudius Victor Amrinus, was appointed governor of Germania Superior. Um, Not sure if we're going to read this whole thing. I might be going off in a minute here. Um, I'm trying to see if they have something on here that talks about his death. Um, yeah, I'm gonna go. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to read all this, but you guys get the idea of Marcus Aurelius. let me know what you guys' thoughts are on him, and stuff like that. But if you like the video, you can hit, you can, if you like the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button to Rusty and the King. You can also head over to my other channel, RBW King. Check that out. Tell me what you want to see on that channel. That one's particularly different than this one. But either way, it's good to get subscribers on both. I'm also going to be doing my movie tomorrow, where I'm auditioning for my role, and then sometime in March, me and my roommate friend, are starting a podcast. But you guys are also free to check that out too, when we get it up and running. We don't have a name for the podcast yet, but we're looking to get sponsors, and once we do, that'll be good, because then we can get our channel put out on major podcasting platforms. Once it happens. Yeah. I'm hoping this call will be over by then, but who knows?